Hi everybody, my name is Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek today. We're in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, and it is Saturday, and that means it's time to review a product. I have not painted a lot with gouache on this channel, and one of the things that I've really wanted to do is to get into a professional set of gouache. I've been using student grade, and I like it, but I really wanted to get into a professional grade, and I did a lot of research, and I will recommend the Holbein gouache. I decided to get mine in these sets of the seasons, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with the summer set, and then we'll look at the rest of the seasons as time goes on. But today we're going to focus on this one, and we're going to talk about gouache and hopefully learn a little bit along the way. Are you ready? Let's go figure it out. Well, before we really get down and dirty into the Holbein Iridori gouache here, and these really are fun to play with, what I want to do is talk to you guys about gouache in general, because I don't want you to think that you have to jump into a professional tier set, and you don't have to jump into a set of 12 either. What I'm going to do is show you the different kinds of gouache that I have, including this Hemi set, and I am not happy with the Hemi set, but a lot of people are. So, you know, this is just my opinion. Just keep all of that in mind. But these are things that work for me as an artist and instructor, and maybe they'll work for you too. This art philosophy set, it does have pigment information on it and light fastness, but I'm not sure that it's professional grade. This is Casein. This is something I want to talk to you about. It also has pigment information on it. This is by Jack Richardson, and this is kind of a parenthetical aside to gouache, because when you're painting with gouache, you can paint in layers. You can go light to dark, dark to light, but you might want a really secure base layer, and Casein is going to give you more security. There's another kind of gouache out there that you can use for a base layer that will work, but Casein is a good one to start with. You could get just a primary set of these and be real happy with them. I don't know if these tubes come in other sizes, but this is the one that I chose, and you need very, very little of it. It has a very slight smell of pine sol. That doesn't bother me. And I don't think the smell is very strong at all. It's not like opening some paint thinner or anything. You can't smell it that much, but it is definitely there, the smell, and it dissipates. It's not annoying at all. So the thing about Casein, now I'm not talking about egg tempera, because sometimes that comes up with Casein as well, but it's a water-based media, and you can see how beautifully it dissipates and spreads around. It's very smooth to work with. It's really quite lovely. The reason that I want to show this to you is that when it dries, we'll go ahead and try and lift it off. You cannot lift it off or agitate it as much as you can the other gouaches that we have here. So we're going to just put this little square of Casein down, and then let's move on to the next. The Hemi gouache, as you can see, mine does not work well in this climate. It just doesn't. I have tried everything, every suggestion anyone has given me to try and get these to reconstitute, and they just won't. So I don't know if it's my set or if it's me or my lack of interest, because I've found better things to use. But at any rate, the Hemi gouache set, they're a lot like tempera paints for me. They dry very chalky. They feel rough on the paper when they're dry. And this set, I would definitely say go ahead and get it if you want to just experiment and try something fun and different. They are that, but for continued use of gouache, they did not work for me. The next one I want to talk about very briefly is this art philosophy gouache. I also have a review on this one. I will try and link to that one in the description as well. I bought these because I thought, okay, a tube gouache set is probably what I want. Let me see if this one, which is very approachable in price, is going to work for me. And I was not thrilled. I liked it better than the Hemi set, but I'm not thrilled with it. And I think it's because it goes on kind of gel-like. It's still that gelatinous texture, and it's just not something that, I don't know, it's a very subtle difference, but I'm a very tactile person, and I like things to feel a certain way when I'm creating art. And then there was this little guy. He is a Royal Talons Student Tempera. Really like the way it felt, but when it dries, it's also pretty gritty, and the bottle was kind of impractical for me. So I thought I'd move on. I really felt like, okay, we're getting somewhere, but this isn't quite it. So then I tested the Holbein tubes here, and these four that I have, these small 5 milliliter tubes, they did come with that same art kit. and I was amazed at the quality difference. It's something that you have to feel, to experience. And, oh, where's my brush? There it is. I noticed the difference right away. It not only does it act like I would expect a paint from a tube to act, I was able to just move it on the paper with a lot less frustration. The entire experience of painting is easier to do. And that is something that I just really, really like. And you can see the difference in the brush strokes that show through. I mean, the Casein looks like velvet, the Hemi is very streaky, and so is the Royal Talons. So let's take a look at the Oriental Blue that comes in this, the Iridori Summer set here. It comes out of the tube really well, and you'll notice the amount of paint that I put out. You need very, very little. Since you're mixing it with water, you can get it to go a very long ways. And that is something that I'll be completely honest with you. I'm still working on how much paint I really need to put out on my palette because I end up with a lot of paint left over. And the great thing about it is, though, is that you can reactivate it and use it again on your next painting. Keeping that in mind, though, I much prefer to use gouache out of the tube rather than having to put it in pans and go from there. I feel like you have a lot more freedom if you're using it from the tube, because then you can adjust how thick you want the paint, how opaque you want your strokes to be, and you just have a whole lot more leeway if you're working from the tube. Now, very briefly here, I've already dried these. I just want to mention a note about how they feel when they're dry. The Hemi and the Royal Talons are no question student grade. You can very definitely feel the pigment. You can feel the gritty texture. They have a little bit of a chalky look to them. They don't look velvety at all. The Casein feels very smooth, very soft. The Casein and the art philosophy is a little bit gritty, not quite as gritty as the Hemi and the Casein, but the two Holbein swatches and the Casein, all three of those really feel very velvety, smooth. And with the absence of that gritty texture, you can really tell that more work has gone to refine those pigments, and it's just more time has been spent to make the product, and therefore you know you're dealing with a professional grade supply rather than that gritty student grade texture that can dry chalky. So that will help you understand a little bit about the grades of supplies you can get. Of course, it's no different than any other art supply. But I do want to show you here about lifting. And this is why I wanted to introduce you to Casein, because you see you can get a little bit of lifting, but not a lot. If you are the type of artist that likes to work with an underlayer, I would definitely recommend using Casein as your first layer, because you can see here with all of the gouache, whether they are student grade or professional, you can lift the color very, very easily. And that can be challenging if you're trying to go to add on another layer. And with gouache, you can go light over dark or dark over light. It doesn't matter the order in which you go. It's just that the underlayers are very unstable. And if you're looking to have a more stable underlayer, I would recommend using the Casein. There's yet another product out there that I haven't mentioned yet, and it is called Acryl Gouache. It is a gouache that has an acrylic blend, and that will also give you more stability. I haven't worked with that one, but I do know that it's got that acrylic in it, which will keep it from lifting as much. So if that's something you want to try for an underlayer, that one might work for you as well. All of these should be available individually as well as in sets, so you wouldn't have to invest in a whole bunch right away. So far you've learned something that you probably already knew, that gouache is a water-based media and that there are different grades that you can get. Well, let me show you some of the different art you can achieve with gouache. You can get a lot of texture out of it. You can do graphic images. There is just so many different things that you can do with gouache. You can mix colors, you can layer, you can blend. You can achieve things that look like oil paintings. In fact, this was a tutorial I did with Lindsay Wyrick. And I was going to say Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman, but Lindsay Wyrick, one of my favorite artists, she did an oil tutorial on that one, and I used gouache, and this one I did on my own. It's an old man holding kale at the market, and I was very pleased with the painterly effects I could get with both of these two. And I absolutely love doing cartoon or graphic art or things like the National Park posters, which I will show you at the end. And of course, this one with a lot of texture. So without further ado, let us finally get over to the Iridori gouache and let's play with it. So here we go. Here are the 4 seasons. The summer is on the top, and then you have fall and spring, and then finally winter on the bottom. Now I use a metal butcher's tray as my palette for gouache typically because I like the surface area that I have on it. You can get any palette in any size, but this one I just happened to pick up. It's about 9 inches by 12 inches, and I really do like it. I'm going to link to everything in this video in the description, but when I got these, I didn't buy them from an art supply store. I did find them on Amazon because the prices were so good, and someone mentioned to me in the art haul video that maybe I might have gotten a product return because not all of my Iridori sets had this brochure on the inside. But the spring one did, so we're going to use that. And the reason I'm choosing the summer set here on the lower left is because if you look at the colors, they are very true, very vibrant, and more towards the primary version of those colors. So I think if you're a watercolorist looking to get into gouache, this would be a great set for you to try if you're looking for a set. Gouache is just a little bit different animal than watercolor, and I highly recommend using man-made filament brushes. That nylon fiber is going to allow you to control your water better, and you're going to be a happier gouache painter if you save your watercolor brushes for watercolor. So these are packaged really nicely. I will have no problem keeping them in the boxes that they come in, and I'm very excited that this one came with an ultramarine blue. It's one of my favorite colors, and all of these paints do come with pigment information. They all come with light fastness information as well, but I'm going to get into that in just a minute. I've got our color chart all set. I've just blocked it out with a Sharpie, so let's get started and we can do some swatches here. So as I'm putting these colors out, I've got this part sped up. I'm having no trouble with them at all. They're coming out exactly like the little samples that I had, and I'm very happy with them. There is nothing untoward. Nothing's going as I didn't expect. They're coming out of here very easily. I don't have to mix anything. It really is a pleasure just even to just put these little daubs of paint out on my palette. None of the tubes are hard to open. Everything is packaged well. A couple of the colors are a little bit harder to squeeze than others, but not so hard that it's prohibitive. I think that was the Taisha brown, the ultramarine blue, and I think the white. I think those 3 were just a little more stiff in their when I squirted them out on the palette, those 3. But the rest of them came out just fine. The black had a tiny bit of pigment separation, and that can be normal. It can happen sometimes. If that happens to you, all you have to do is stick your paintbrush or some other toothpick, something in there, and you can just mix it right in the tube. So the brush that I'm going to use today for this swatching is a Blick Master Stroke Golden Taklon number 10. I think I'm using a number 10, either that or number 8. These are the flat shader brushes. I love them. They're very easy to use, and they're some of my favorite brushes for gouache. I also like using those Princeton snap brushes that you can see up on top of the swatch chart there that I made. The first color, I'll just talk about the pigment information and light fastness as I'm swatching these out, and you can see that I'm going over that Sharpie line, the black mark there in each box. I'm going over that with a little bit of a mass tone so that you can see how opaque these are. The Scarlet is PR 254, and they say it's got 3 stars of light fastness and that it is semi-transparent. I'm also adding some water and bringing it up to the swatch so that you can see how it mixes and how different gradients of color that you can get different values. Now let's move on to the orange yellow. Once again, very easy to mix. This one is listed as transparent. It is a PO 73, a PY 83, and it shows 2 stars of light fastness. And once again, I've got no trouble blending the water with it, no trouble mixing whatsoever. Now let's move on to the yellow. They call this a canola yellow. PY 74, transparent, 2 stars of light fastness. And these colors are named in a way that is very much in the Japanese tradition of art. The colors are at least according to the brochure, they are named according to the traditional colors of Japan that are found in that season. So that's something that really appealed to me. When I was teaching children, I would make lesson plans for K2, kindergarten through grade 2, and actually pre-K as well. I would make the lesson plans according to nature and the seasons because it was so easy for students to understand and have a ready application to what the lesson was covering. So that is something that really appealed to me about these seasons sets, is I thought that as a teacher and perpetual student that I could learn from these colors while putting my mindset in the frame of summer here, which I really wish we were yet, but not quite. At any rate, yes, I think the seasons are a great way to go on these, and that's why I decided to choose that format for purchasing these sets of gouache. The brown is called Taisha Brown, and that is a PBR 7, PR 101, and a PY 42. 4 light fastness stars, and it is listed as opaque. Jumping over to the spring green, we have a transparent pigment with 2 light fastness stars. It is a PY 14 and a PG 7. Now that Taisha Brown, the PBR 7 and PR 101, those are very typically used in burnt sienna. And to me, visually, that's what this brown looks like. And the spring green also looks very much like a spring green or a leaf green. And so far, these pigments are just no surprise, which is another thing that I really liked about it. I didn't want to, with my very first test of the Holbein gouache, I didn't want to have to go over the hurdle of maybe dealing with a more pastel version of a pigment. So I think that, once again, if you're going to get a set and you want to do something with these Iridori sets, this summer set is very good for that reason. The evergreen here is a PY3, PG7, and a PY83, 2 light fastness stars and semi-transparent. You can see by looking across that top of the row with the black swatches there of the Sharpie that the opaque in that Taisha Brown is not really super opaque. So I suppose if you were to make it thicker, you might be able to get more opacity out of it, but that wasn't my goal with the swatching. So because gouache, it dries matte anyway, so it will look opaque even if you're using a transparent pigment. Where that knowledge is important to you as an artist is it going to cover your pencil lines, or is it going to be more difficult to cover a layer underneath? So you do need that information, but it's not something that this swatch here is going to reveal for you because of the way that I swatched it. So keep that in mind. Bamboo green, bottom left, that's PG7 and a PW6, and that one is semi-opaque, 2 stars of light fastness. The ultramarine is a PB29. It is semi-transparent and 3 stars of light fastness. PB29 is the ultramarine, as we know. That's a very familiar pigment for a lot of us artists. A lot of us use it. This one, as it is a gouache, won't granulate. You won't find any granulation in gouache. It's just not something that is part of it. It doesn't, in the way that I think about it, the reason that it would granulate is because it's a transparent pigment with watercolor. And when you have that translucency, then you can visually see that pigment settle down into the different levels of your cold press paper. And that's when you get that great granulation to show up. I'm not saying that the granulation doesn't happen here. It's just that visually you're not going to see it because of the nature of the paint. So these paints will work somewhat like watercolor, but they're going to perform differently in that you won't be able to achieve the things where you let the pigment work for you. Think of it more like an acrylic or an oil, where when you blend it, when you mix it, you can get those soft edges to abut one another, and you can definitely use dry brush techniques on top of your wet work, but you're not going to get paints to mix on your paper and have them charged together, things like that. The Oriental Blue is transparent. It is PB15, PG7, 3 stars of light fastness. The Edo Violet is a PB29 and a PR122. It is semi-transparent with 3 stars of light fastness. That black is amazing. It's completely opaque. 4 stars of light fastness, and it, interestingly enough, is a PBK 7.6. I have not yet encountered that pigment in all my years as an artist, and I just thought that was very interesting. The white is a PW6, very common pigment. It is semi-opaque and 4 stars of light fastness. So when you're looking at these, you're not looking for real light fastness, and let me explain why. When I was showing you the different types of art that you can achieve through gouache, historically, gouache was created, at least in the Western world, to be used as a tool to create other media from. So the National Park posters is a good example. Those were used, they're originally painted in gouache, but then from that gouache painting that has that matte finish, printers were able to use that on their printing, not have any reflections from the light come off strangely as if it were watercolor. So you could get a true replication of that color, print mass quantities of the poster, and have them all come out the same because your master copy is genuine true color. Now, that's also true of, well, I'll go back to Disney. The Disney artists that paint on the animation cells, they were either mylar or acetate. I'm not sure what they were used in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when they were doing that style of animation. Gosh, I guess even later too. But in a lot of the early animation film, everything was painted with gouache on a cell or a transparent sheet. And the movement of the film was done by changing the layers of the cells and changing that movement slightly, like with stop motion, only very put together quickly so that it looks like fluid motion. So that is how gouache was originally used. So that's where you get the differentiation that you might see between designer gouache and artist gouache. Okay, so designer gouache is that gouache. It's that type of gouache that's used to make other art from. So it's not intended to be light fast. The fact that these have a light fast rating, I suspect, is what makes them artist gouache. You'll notice that the light fast ratings are kind of all over the place. We only have a couple in here that are 4 stars. So you really wouldn't want to paint something out of this and then hang it on a wall unless you put a fixative on it that had a real a UV coating to it. And that's something that you could definitely do. You can also put museum glass over it. But gouache was not intended, at least in my knowledge in the Western world, it was not intended to be used for art that you will hang on your wall per se. It's definitely something that you would use to create an animation, a poster, something like that. So with that in mind, I'm using a sketchbook that is just recycled paper. It's not even meant for wet media, but it's thick enough. And that's another beautiful thing about gouache, is that you can just put it on just about anything. You don't need to have watercolor paper. It performs better on watercolor paper, but you don't need to have watercolor paper. So this is kind of a journal that I'm going to use as an idea book. And this is a painting that I had an idea that I thought would be fun if I tried to do an animation style painting of this tree, and then to kind of have an image of this girl on the tire swing, but only have a very faint silhouette of her on the swing. I kind of wanted the image to convey a memory of childhood, a longing for childhood, or a happy memory, either one, depending on how the viewer looked at it. So I was kind of playing with this idea, and I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do this here with this gouache test to see how it works. And as I was painting this tree, I really was reminded of one of my favorite Disney movies, once again Disney, Sleeping Beauty. If you watch that film, about 18 minutes in, I think it's at about 18 minutes, it's right after the Maleficent realizes that her goonies have, her goons, Goonies is a different film. Anyway, her lackeys, her people that are working for her little animals, they have been searching for a baby or the wrong person. And so she says, no, she would be grown by this time. She would be 16. So you don't look for a baby. I can't believe you've been looking for a baby all these years. Go out and find her. And the scene shifts and they go into the forest, and that image right there where that starts, where the leaves part and the trees part, and then you see Sleeping Beauty's cottage where she's there with Merryweather and Flora and Fauna, her fairy godmothers. That scene where the camera is taking you into the cottage, of course the entire film's done with gouache, but that particular scene, that is the moment that I fell in love with gouache. When I first saw that movie when I was a child, I remember asking my mom, how did they do that? Because it looks like a diorama when those pieces move and you're drawn into the scene. And I was only a little girl, but I was so fascinated with that. And I was always doing something with art, always, from a very early age. I learned how to sew when I was 4. So I've always been very, very interested in creativity. And my mother was a draftsman and an artist, and she was very, very patient, and she was able to show me things. And so after watching Sleeping Beauty, of course, we had to go to the theater to see it back in the 60s. But when we did, I remember asking her about that and how they did that. And she showed me. She showed me how that movie was made, because with her drafting supplies, she was able to put some gouache on a cell and show me how that was created, that scene. And I was so fascinated that that was translated into something so visually stunning to me as a child. So even still to this day, gouache has that effect on me, and I love its graphic nature. Now, I did show you some very painterly pieces in the beginning that you can definitely achieve with gouache. But for me, my favorite style of gouache is something very, very graphic in nature. And that is why I also like this set of 12, because you've got these pigments that are going to give you bright, vibrant mixes. And I found that definitely to be true when I was playing with these. I've got a couple, 3 paintings that I've done with this set. And with everything that I did, I found the colors to be very true, very vibrant, very easy to apply, even on this little paper that's not even watercolor paper. Now, I am not saying that Disney's going to be knocking down my door saying, "Anne, please come paint for us," but I'm saying that's my inspiration, was that scene in Sleeping Beauty. And if you have Disney Plus, or if you've still got your VHS or DVD from when you or your children were little, go check it out. It's about 18 minutes into the movie, and it's that great moment where the forest parts and you are introduced to Sleeping Beauty's cottage. So that's my inspiration for this tree. And yeah, I was just really excited that it was coming to life. And now I'm going to speed this up. I think I've got this on 20 times speed, because I just want to show you how easy it is to paint with this gouache. And remember, this isn't even watercolor paper. This is just regular recycled paper. This is just an idea journal that I have. And if you watch here where I'm taking the paint directly over the tire, you can see I didn't smudge it. I was able to go very lightly over it, dry it, and then come back in and clean that up. So you have a lot of versatility with this medium. And I really am a huge proponent of this set the more and more that I use it. I've painted a few things with it, like I told you, and every time I use it, I just am happier with it. I've mixed a gray here from the Taisha Brown and the Ultramarine, and I was able to get a very faint, kind of a ghosty image of this little girl here. And again, this is just my idea book. This is something that I want to remember might be a good idea for a bigger piece or more of a focus later on. But I really like the animated feel of that tree, how it reminds me of that scene in Sleeping Beauty, and that this piece here will serve as a springboard for me to create additional art later. So that is something that I was really pleased with and had no problem whatsoever doing and achieving with this Iridori Holbein gouache set. Now I want to shift gears and show you another bit of versatility that works very, very well with this set. If you're a crafter and you like making cards, or if you wanted to work on some ornaments, or if you like to just paint botanicals, maybe you like to paint wreaths, things like that. I'm going to do a very graphic style of some very simple florals here for you so that you can see how they look in a gouache as opposed to watercolor. I'm just doing a very simple rose here with a bud. I'm having no trouble mixing the paints at all. And now I'm moving on to kind of a stylized version of a Dutch iris, and you can see that Edo purple is just very vibrant, rich, wonderful in its pigmentation. The green, in order to get it that dark, I've just added some black to it, and that was the evergreen that I added a little bit of black to, and that gave it kind of a nice earthy tone. And now we're going to try some of that bamboo green, and I'm going to do kind of a little bit of a bachelor button here with some of the oriental blue for accents. So there's all kinds of different things you can do. Here I'm working on a little marigold and using some of those, the canola yellow and the orange yellow, because I wanted to make sure that I tested all of the colors in some way to paint them. I loved every minute of it. The colors go down vibrantly, easily. I could layer over them no problem, and you can make them sheer, you can make them very opaque. Very simple to mix. I'm adding white to the red here to create a pink. And nothing's a struggle. Everything is just going really well. So I think no matter where you are or what you're doing in your art, if you happen to be in the market to try some gouache and you're looking for professional grade supply, this Iridori summer set really is a wonderful anchor point for you to get started. So here is the kind of art that I really like to create with gouache. I am a huge fan of the travel posters from the early part of the 20th century, and this is my version of a poster that exists, or it's a mock-up poster that exists for Rocky Mountain National Park. So when you see this image online, it might have a bighorn sheep, our state animal, in the foreground, but I decided to leave him out. But I wanted you to see how versatile and how wonderfully you could create depth and interest in your paintings with these the Iridori Summer Gouache. This is the set that I used to create this poster, and I've got one more poster here to show you of Zion National Park. That one is in Utah and also very beautiful. This is the poster that came, that is the one that was featured from there. This is actually from a panel of fabric by Riley Blake Designs. I don't know if these two images are taken from the original posters or if they are new reproductions, but it's the same style of art, it's the right feel, and I just wanted to show them to you so that you could see the wonderful graphic nature that I personally love painting with gouache. Well, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with me this long. I really appreciate it. I hope that this review has answered your questions and you've seen the different ways that you can use the Holbein Iridori set of artist gouache. And this is the summer version. We've got 3 more to go, so look for those videos coming up for the fall, spring, and the winter sets. We'll paint something different there. And I hope everybody has a great week. See you next time, guys. Thanks so much. Bye now.